let's go ahead and do a bit more sculpting, and then we're going to jump into other processes for the rest of these meshes. So let's go ahead and bring in another brush. So I'm going to bring in a palette here, and let's select the clay brush. So I'm going to use this one right here. And also I'm going to introduce you to a couple more, like the standard brush. That's why it's very standard and very important. This one right here, standard brush. And let's also select the damn standard brush, which is this one right here. So I'm going to click on damn standard here. So those are some of the essential brushes. I'm going to also introduce you to the inflate brush, this one right here, and also the pinch brush. So let's filter by the letter P, and it's this one right here. So these brushes are absolutely fantastic. They are some of the most basic brushes, and you can achieve a lot of complexity without the need of any other brush. That's what is really important. So let's go ahead and take the standard brush and hold Control-Alt, drag it and drop it in here next to the Move Topological. Control-Alt, and I'm going to drag in the damn standard now. Now let's go ahead and bring in the clay buildup and also the clay. And finally, the inflate. And let's select another one and choose the pinch one, which was the last one that we added. There we go. And let's go ahead and collapse this. Awesome. So now we have the most used brushes in here. So we're going to start the process of sculpting, and you can explore more brushes later on. These are just the basics. So I'm going to start with the standard brush because there's a reason why this is the standard, is the most important one, or the simplest one, but also very, very powerful. So when you click and drag with the standard brush, you're going to add volumes straight away, right? So this is really cool because you can use this to add maybe around the eyes. Let's go ahead and press and add a little bit of a eyebrow. So the more that you press, the more that you add volume. And we can do the same thing maybe with a smaller brush size around here, around the horn. So we can do that. And this is why I mentioned that the smooth brush becomes very essential, because once you start doing this, you can continuously smooth out these sections, and that becomes very, very easy. All right. So why not use this standard brush for absolutely everything? Well, because if I go ahead and do something like this, let's do something random here. We're going to get rid of that. Something like this, and then I do another one here, and then another one here. You end up with kind of like the gap or this crevice in between the brush strokes. So if you want to maybe add more, you can just go like this and then try to fill those areas. But every time that you add something, it becomes, if you look at it from the left-hand side, let's go ahead and change this color. It becomes very bumpy, right? And this is one of the most visible signs of someone that is just getting started with ZBrush, because you end up with a mesh or I don't know, like a head or a character that looks very, very lumpy. You know, it has all these variations in the surface, so it doesn't look clean. And one of the reasons is because you have a better way of approaching these type of things. So we can use the clay brush or the clay buildup. Now, the difference between these two is how fast they build up the volume and the way that they look. So I'm going to show you both. So let's say with the clay, I can just press and it creates these sort of like strips of clay, but it is quite flat, right? Compared to the standard brush. So let's do the comparison here. So this is the standard brush. So you look at it from the angle, the standard brush gives you this nice volume. So it is a very helpful brush for things like creating wrinkles or folds, or what we did for the eyes and the horns in this case. But the clay brush is a little bit flatter. So let's go ahead and undo that. That allows you to build volume or to define things a little bit better. So here on top of the arm, we can just go ahead and press and do this a few times just to create a bit of a, I would say like a wrinkle here. And then use the smooth brush, holding shift to smooth that out. And that basically integrates all of these with the rest of the body. Now, if you see it from this angle, let's clear this up. From this angle, we have this that kind of like works and is nice and everything. But from here, there is a bit of a dip, and then there is this section here. So actually, let me do it with a different color so you can see. This bit right here is the same thing as what we just added, okay? So that's cool. But we want to maintain some consistency. I want to maybe, with a yellow color, I want to fill this a little bit, right? So let's do that so that you don't see that very, very evident sort of gap in here. So we can do it with the clay brush, or we can jump to the clay buildup that builds volume really fast. So I'm going to press really hard, and you see how this is very, very harsh, and the volume is, you know, is huge. And I can just go ahead and do this multiple times, and it just builds volume really quickly. The great thing about this brush is that you can also press really softly, and even though it is very harsh, you can build volume really nicely and softly. So I'm going to go ahead and press softly and just add a little bit of clay in there. And then maybe kind of like in a perpendicular motion, I'm gonna do the same thing. So I'm pressing really, really softly, like so. And then we can use the smooth brush to smooth this out. So all I've done is just add a bit of volume in this area that I needed and just fill it up. So that becomes the essence of sculpting. So just patience, really. So I'm gonna add a little bit of volume here and then smooth that out. Okay, great. Now, if I wanna maybe have something a little bit more interesting here for the hands, right? Let's say the knuckles, I'm gonna use the clay brush here. I'm gonna add 1, 2, 3. That adds a tiny bit of information or volume that is not, super well defined, but I can use the smooth brush to incorporate this a little bit more. So that kind of like becomes the norm of how you approach the volume building. Which brushes do you use? So maybe here I want to add a bit more, smooth this out, and maybe go down here with the palm and add some volume here, smooth that out. And you see I'm constantly doing that. I'm just adding volume and make sure that everything is nice and clean by smoothing that portion that I just added. Okay, so the next one is the damp standard brush, or kind of like the one that I skipped here. But this one is great because it's kind of like a knife brush. It allows you to cut through the model. So this one is fantastic to, emphasize things like these crevices. So maybe we can just go ahead and do this and smooth that out as well. And the same thing here. Maybe we can increase a bit of that crevice in here and maybe a little bit in there, just to have a bit of an indication that there's some folds or some weight in these areas, right? And maybe let's do it with a large brush size and pressing really softly. You can also change the intensity in here just to create a quick way of identifying where the fold of the arm is. Perfect. So we're getting there. As you can see, we started with something that looked very, very blocky, and now we have something that feels more organic, more alive in a way. All right, so I'm going to use this brush to introduce you to another very important thing in the sculpting process. Not everything is additive, meaning that every single thing that I'm showing you is adding volume or adding shapes to the current mesh. But in a lot of cases, what you want to do is subtract and remove things, right? So you can use the Alt key to invert the effect of any brush. So if I press the clay Buildup brush and I press the Alt key when I'm doing it, you see I'm just pushing things in. So this is super basic, but it becomes super relevant depending on what you use. So with the damp standard brush, again, this is the effect. If I press the Alt key, it's just going to push things out. So I like to use this one maybe with a smaller brush size to define the fingers a little bit. So in here, I'm going to press the Alt key and then just go like this. I'm going to press really hard just so you can see what I'm actually doing. I'm just creating a sharper part here, or like a sharper line in here. And you see how it just changes things. It almost suggests like that there is like a fingernail in here. So it's very, very harsh. I'm just going to smooth that out. But doing this already changes that sort of sausage finger that we had before. And it's just pressing the Alt key. Let's do it here as well. And then smooth that out. Great. So we can also use that brush to create kind of like the folding of the fingers here. Maybe we can do a couple of phalanges. Again, it's just a made up creature. And that already gives us something a little bit more interesting. Right. We can always go with the move brush and maybe a larger brush size and adjust things a little bit. I usually spend a lot of time just adjusting things, make sure that the proportions are right and that the different volumes, they flow nicely within each other. So let's just take just a tiny bit of time to adjust the volume so that the shapes look a little bit nicer. This is totally up to you, really. Just wanna share the entire process. All right. Now, one thing that you notice is that from this angle, things look really, really cool and almost the same. But if I rotate around, the ear is not necessarily symmetrical. That is because we move one of these ears and we did it without the symmetry. So you get to this point and you go like, oh, I've spent all this time working on this and it's not symmetrical. Remember that you can always rely on the mirror and well, and because we have Dynamesh, we can redynamesh at any point. So if I go ahead and click on mirror and well right now, ZBrush is going to use the left-hand side and mirror to the right-hand side. So that's not what we want, but I'm going to show you anyway. So I'm going to click on mirror and well. So you see now in both sides, we have the wrong ear, let's say. So let's undo that. And first we're going to mirror, which is something that we've done in the past. So we flipped everything and then mirror and welded, right? And let's go ahead and also maybe adjust the mouth a bit. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and redynamesh, but this time I'm going to redynamesh with a slightly higher resolution. What that is going to allow me to do is add more details. So Not necessarily because I want to add a bunch of details in this case, but just to show you. So if I have my damp standard here and I do this, I can definitely see that cut. But if I get closer, I can still very clearly see the polygon. So it's not going to be a clean line, and it's not going to be able to, or I won't be able to create a tiny detail like this that is very sharp. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and increase the resolution a tiny bit. Let's go for 208. Ideally, you want to go with multiples of 2. So after 128, you can go for 256, right? And control, click, and drag. And now you have almost double of what you had before. So now you will be able to create these very sharp lines, all right? And of course, because we increase the Dynamesh resolution, we will probably need to adjust some of these details. And it's just a matter of smoothing things out a bit. All right, maybe I want to add some more volume here at the back as well. So we can use the clay buildup to build volumes really quickly. And you see the kind of like the stripes that has to do with the alpha of the brushes, but we're not going to get into any of that because that is already kind of like getting into the territory of customizing brushes, which is not really the scope of this introduction to ZBrush. You can totally achieve a good result and create this or finalize this character without the need of any custom brushes. Let's go ahead and go in here, and I'm going to add some more volume as well. And you'll notice this is kind of like the same pattern. And I do this process regardless of the type of mesh that I'm doing, or the character, or the complexity. Is just a workflow, right? So I'm just adding a little bit of volume and then smoothing that out. All right, so let's move on to the next couple of brushes, which are the inflate and the pinch. So with the inflate, basically you can inflate the mesh. That's what the name says. So for example, here I can go all around this and press harder, and then it inflates that mesh. Now I'm going to turn on the polyframe just to show you what this does, because it does affect the mesh, and it does it based on the normals. I'll explain what that is in just a second. But if I press really hard in here, you see that this mesh sort of like goes out. And if I press again, it just goes out towards the camera. And if I press again, it just keeps going up. But every time that I do it, these polygons, they get larger and larger. What the inflate brush does is actually look at the normals of the polygons. And the normals are just the way that the software knows in which direction a polygon is pointing. So very briefly, let's say if we take one of these planes, these tiny squares, right? This is the polygon, right? It has 4 vertices that are connected to other pieces, like, or other polygons, right? So that is the polygon. And then there is a normal that is not visible, but this is how the software reads it and knows how to push it in this case, or how to inflate it. So there is a point, or like imagine like an arrow pointing in a direction that is perpendicular to this plane, right? So if you look at the plane from a side view, so this is your plane or your polygon, the normal is going to be perpendicular to that plane, right? So that's the normal of the polygon. So what happens with the inflate, because you have something that is not planar. So in other words, if you look at let's look at it from here. So you have this plane, then you have this one, you have this, you have this. So I'm going to do it a bit larger. So this is one plane, this is another plane, this is another one, and this is another one, right? So all of these points, or all of these planes, they have a normal, right? Or a normal direction. So this one points this way, because this is 90 degrees from the plane or from the polygon. Same thing here, right? So naturally, if you use the inflate brush, which is basically what it does, is telling ZBrush, take the plane and push it against the normal, because it's going to respect that direction. It's going to take this plane, it's going to push it up to, let's say, here, right? And it's going to do the same thing with this one, and it's going to put it here, and do the same thing with the other one, do it here, and then doing this one here, right? So that is kind of like what it would happen, by default, if there is no connection between these planes, right? You just push that along the normal. But because all of these ones are connected, the only way that you can push things along the normals and maintain them connected is scaling them. So this will be a scale to connect here, this one even more, to connect here, and this one probably with the next one. So that's essentially what happens. And that's why this gets inflated, or it feels that it gets inflated. So that's a little bit of the theory, just because, it's important to understand what it does, so you can actually know where to use it. So let's go ahead and undo all of this. Let's go like this. So you can use this for a bunch of things. For example, here, you might think that the ear is a little bit too thin, so you can just go around it and maybe add a bit of thickness. But you might also think, oh, inside here, you might actually want to have more of an indentation. So again, if you press the Alt key, which is to invert the effect of the brush, instead of inflating, you will be deflating. So I'm going to push holding the Alt key. right? So very important set of tools. Let's go ahead and smooth all of these out. And I actually want to add more volume around the horns here and smooth that out as well. Just so it's a little bit more interesting. All right. And because I push this quite a bit, this area right here feels like the resolution is low. So we can redynamesh. So Control, click, and drag to redynamesh. There we go. And that's pretty much it. And the last one is pinch. Is not something that I use often, especially not in a, in a stylized or organic mesh, but you can definitely use it for very, very important things. So for example, if you want something like very, very sharp around the edges of this mouth, let's go into solo. With the pinch selected, you're going to push this, and I'm going to press really hard so you can see. It creates this very nice and clean edge here, which is different than using the damp standard brush in the, holding the Alt key. Because what this does, what the pinch does, is actually let's actually go into polyframe here. You see, it just takes all these polygons and it just crunches them together towards the center line. So if you go through this with the pinch here, it's going to take all of these points and it's going to push them against, or pinch them. That's what the name is. Pinch them towards the center of that brush. So let me just clear this and undo all of this. I'll do it here so you can see. And I'm going to select the pinch and I'm going to press really hard. And you see, the harder that I press, the more these points get to the center line up until a point that, I'm actually destroying that geometry. But it is very, very sharp. Now, the cool thing is that this is kind of like destroying it, right? But if you do like this, you like the sharpness of this, which is a fantastic way to create, let's say, hard surface and all of that. You like this, you can just hold Control, click, and drag and redynamesh. And that is going to recreate that mesh, or let me actually undo that. I'm going to hold Control, click, and drag here. You see, it's just going to recreate that portion that you just changed, and it's going to maintain that sharp edge. So let's undo that, because that's not necessarily what I want. I just wanted to show you what the pinch does. So the pinch is very handy. You can use it in a bunch of different ways. Let's add a tiny bit of pinches for the sake of demo around the lips. And then I'm going to use this standard brush to enhance the lips, and maybe the bottom lip a little bit more, just to add some meat to it. And let's use this smooth brush. All right, so that is pretty much it. Let's go ahead and maybe add a bit of an eyelid here. So using the standard brush, we can do that. And I'm going to use the move topological. I'm going to increase the brush size. And this is the kind of like the final tweak that I would do with the Dynamesh. Even though we have Dynamesh and we have polygroups and we have a single mesh, right? In fact, just so that the colors don't distract you, we can go to what I mentioned before, the polygroups. And I'm going to hold the Alt and the Alt key, and I'm going to drag auto groups right underneath here. Okay, so that is what I mentioned before. You can click on auto group, and anything that is a separate object is going to have a different group. But because all of this has been Dynamesh, all of this has been merged and redynamesh into a single object, we can only get one color. So the reason I want to mention this is because even though we have a single color and a single mesh in here, the topology brush still respects that topology. And it does it in a way that actually deals with proximity. So this one right here, if I want to push my ear closer to the body, because I have the move topological and I have this large brush, I can go ahead and click and drag. And you see, it is kind of like respecting things. So it's moving the ear a little bit, but it's also moving the arm. So if I reduce my brush size, now the reach of the brush is a lot smaller because of the brush size. I can just go ahead and do this. And you see, I'm not affecting anything else. So I can just push this closer. And this is actually a very good example of where you can use either the Inflate brush or the pinch. So if I select my pinch brush and let's go ahead and press here, you see it's just going to pinch this area. Maybe it's too large, right? It's going to pinch this area. Alternatively, you can play with the Inflate brush a little bit. There we go. And of course, redynamesh the whole thing and smooth that out. Right? So that's exactly what I wanted to show you. I think we are making good progress. Now we're going to go ahead and move to other processes so that you understand the full scope of sculpting, and we're going to wrap it up very soon.